One statement sounded right, until Wolfe heard it. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your presence makes this special. Let's begin. If you want a fair sample of how the world insists on behaving, drop by West 35th Street any weekday around 11, when the city is starting to feel itself and the sidewalks have decided they own your ankles. A man will step out of a doorway at the exact instant you reach it. A taxi will claim the air in front of your nose. A lady with a package the size of a phonograph will turn sideways without warning and take the whole lane. Then, if you're me, you open the front door of a brownstone that has been holding its ground since before you were born, and you get hit with a wave of calm so thick you could spread it on toast. Inside, it was that kind of day. Fritz Brenner was moving with the solemn efficiency of a priest, polishing something I couldn't identify but suspected had no business being polished. Theodor Horstmann, Wolfe's orchid man, had already gone upstairs, which meant the plants were receiving their late morning audience. The house itself had the usual hush, the kind Wolfe paid for with his habits and enforced with his scowl. I just sat at my desk and was in the pleasant process of making my pen behave when the doorbell rang. I looked at the clock. 10:57. I looked toward the hallway and listened. Fritz, with his allergy to haste, did not hurry. The bell rang again, insistent, not frantic. That was a small thing, but small things are the only things you're allowed to notice in a place like ours. Then I got up and went to the front hall because I was in one of my accommodating moods and because my employer, Nero Wolfe, believes with religious devotion that the proper distance between him and the front door is one flight of stairs, one hall, and one assistant named Archie Goodwin. I opened the door. A woman stood on the stoop like she'd been placed there by an interior decorator who didn't like her. Not too tall, not too short, neat as a pin, brown hair with a modest wave that looked achieved by means other than panic. A grey coat, gloves, a handbag that probably had its own accountant. Her face was the kind you wouldn't call pretty to her face unless you wanted to be sued, but it had balance, and her eyes were busy. Behind her stood a man half a foot taller and twice as restless, as with the stiff look of somebody who'd been forced into city clothes from a room full of maps. He had a briefcase and a jaw like a shovel. The woman said, "Good morning. Is Mr. Wolfe at home?" That question, addressed to me in my own doorway, always makes me feel like telling them Mr. Wolfe is not at home. He is in his chair, which is where he lives. But you can't say that to people with expensive gloves. Not if you want them to come inside and make trouble. "He's at home," I told her. "Whether he's available depends on what you brought with you besides the briefcase." "Name?" "Clara Reinhardt," she said. "This is Mr. Halstead." "Ben Halstead," the shovel jaw supplied. "I'm counsel." Counsel. That word has a way of swelling in a foyer. I stepped aside. "Come in. You can leave the snow out there. Not that there's any." They came in. Stubborn Fritz appeared with his polite face and his dry hands. "Mr. Goodwin," Fritz said, as if there were any doubt. His eyes shifted to the visitors. He had the little blank expression he reserves for outsiders who might be trouble. It's not contempt exactly, more like a man evaluating fruit. "Fritz, tell Mr. Wolfe we have callers," I said. "Mrs. Reinhardt and Mr. Halstead." Fritz inclined his head and went away. I led them into the office. It's a good room for staging drama because it refuses to participate. The chairs are sturdy and unromantic. The rug is practical. The walls don't whisper secrets, they file them. Ms. Reinhardt sat where I indicated, folding her gloves with precision. Halstead sat too, but he sat the way a man sits when he'd rather be standing in a courtroom with a judge listening. "Do you want water?" I asked. "No," they said, but in different tones. I sat behind my desk. If you're going to have people under your roof, it's wise to give them the impression you are not easily impressed. We waited. The waiting wasn't long. Wolfe is never late when there might be an interruption to his schedule. He's early in order to resent it properly. He entered through the side door from the hall, large as a judge and twice as immovable. He wore one of his better brown suits, the one that makes him look like an expensive piece of furniture. He stopped behind his desk chair, did not sit, and regarded them. "Good morning," he said. "You have requested my attention." He sat. He arranged himself. He fixed his gaze on Ms. Reinert, not because she was the prettier of the two, she wasn't, but because he had an instinct for who was really holding the leash. Ms. Reinert met his eyes. "Mr. Wolfe, I'm sorry to come without an appointment. I was told—" "You were told I do not accept callers without an appointment," Wolfe said. "And yet you came." Her mouth tightened. "Yes." "Then you consider your business urgent?" "Yes." Wolfe's eyes shifted briefly to Halstead. "And you have brought counsel. That is prudent or it is aggressive?" Halstead cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe, my presence is—" "Your presence is irritating," Wolfe said, "but I have endured worse." "Proceed, madam." That's Wolfe. He will hand you a knife and then watch to see whether you cut bread or throats. Miss Reinert lifted her handbag and placed it on her lap as if it might be subpoenaed. "I'm the director of operations for the Reinert Foundation." Wolfe's eyebrows rose a fraction. "Nah. The Reinert Foundation is the kind of outfit you see in the paper when somebody has done a noble thing with a portion of their conscience. Scholarships, grants, little photo opportunities where smiling people pretend the check is light." Ms. Reinert went on. "We fund research, medical, educational, social policy. We also administer a trust established by my father." "And your father is?" Wolfe asked. "Amos Reinert," she said. That name did something. Wolfe's expression didn't change much, but I've known him long enough to hear the gears click when they're well oiled. "I have read of Mr. Amos Reinert," Wolfe said. "A man of severe temperament and substantial resources. He is deceased." "Yes," Ms. Reinert said softly. "He died in November." Halstead shifted. "Mr. Wolfe, if I may?" Wolfe's eyes slid to him. "You may refrain." Halstead refrained, though it looked physically painful. Ms. Reinert took a breath. "When my father died, he left a statement." Wolfe didn't nod. He didn't encourage. He simply waited, which is the most effective way to make people talk. Ms. Reinert continued. "It wasn't in the will. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It was a typed page, signed, and it was sealed in an envelope and left with our family attorney. It was to be opened after his death." Wolfe's fingers moved once on the arm of his chair. "And it has been opened." "Yes." "And you are here because of its contents," Wolfe said. "Yes." I cleared my throat softly. "Is it one of those statements where a rich man confesses he never loved anybody and leaves his money to a dog?" Ms. Reinert looked at me as if I were an interesting piece of furniture that had spoken out of turn. Wolfe ignored me. "It concerns a grant," she said. "A very large one." Wolfe's eyes grew a shade more attentive. "Money?" "Yes." Halstead couldn't help himself. "A conditional grant," he put in, "with reputational implications." Wolfe held up a hand toward him without looking at him. Halstead stopped like he'd hit a wall. Miss Reinert reached into her handbag and produced an envelope. She placed it on the edge of Wolfe's desk as if it might explode. Wolfe did not touch it. His eyes were on her. "You have brought it to my home." "Yes." "That is either foolish," Wolfe said, "or desperate." "It's neither," she replied. "It's necessary. I can't take it to the police." Wolfe's face made a small adjustment. "Interest." "Not much, but there." "You can," he said. "You choose not to." She swallowed. "If I take it to the police, the foundation will be torn apart, and my father, whatever he was, he built it. I'm trying to protect it." Wolfe's lips pressed together. Protection is often the guise of concealment. Ms. Reinot's eyes flashed. I'm not hiding wrongdoing. I'm trying to prevent damage from something that may not even be true. And yet you have come to a man who sells truth, Wolfe said. I watched her hands. People can keep their faces in line, but their hands always want to tell the truth. Hers were still, but the fingers had a faint tremor. Wolfe said, Mr. Goodwin, retrieve my letter opener. I opened the top right drawer of Wolfe's desk. My hand knows the way like it knows my own pocket, and placed the letter opener in front of him. Wolfe still didn't touch the envelope. Before I open it, he said to Ms. Reinot, you will tell me what you fear. Ms. Reinot's chin lifted. The statement says my father was poisoned. There it was. Not a murder scream. Not a body in an alley. One typed page in an envelope, and a woman trying to hold a foundation together with her bare hands. Wolfe's eyes were steady. Your father died in November. Why are you here now in February? She hesitated just long enough to be noticed, because the statement wasn't opened until last week. Wolfe's brow furrowed. Why not immediately after his death? Halstead answered, unable to stop himself. Because the attorney in possession of the envelope, Mr. Lyle Mercer, suffered a stroke in December. He was incapacitated until recently. His associate discovered the envelope during a review of his files. Wolfe's gaze turned to Halstead, and for a moment it was like watching a spotlight swivel. And Mr. Mercer, Wolfe said, is now alive, Halstead said, but not fully competent. Wolfe looked back to Mrs. Reinot. The statement alleges poisoning. By whom? It doesn't name anyone, she said quickly. It implies. Wolfe's voice cut in, gentle and sharp. Do not give me an interpretation. Give me what is written. Ms. Reinot's throat moved. It says. She stopped. That's the problem. I don't know if it was written by my father. Silence. Wolfe did not react the way people do when they smell blood. He reacted the way he does when he smells something that doesn't belong in his house. You have not read it? He asked. I have, she said. But... Then you know what it says, Wolfe insisted. Yes, but... But you doubt its authorship, Wolfe said, and his tone shifted. Not excitement, not melodrama. Something closer to a man who has been offered a puzzle and suspects the box is mislabeled. Yes, she said. My father had a way of speaking. Even when he typed, it sounded like him. This doesn't. Wolfe leaned back slightly. Ah. I felt it too then, like the click of a lock. Wolfe wasn't interested in a death from November. He was interested in a statement that didn't sound like the man who supposedly wrote it. A counterfeit confession, a planted accusation, a lever someone intended to pull. He finally placed his fingertips on the envelope, but did not open it yet. You are suggesting, Wolfe said, that that Amos Reinot died of natural causes. We don't know it was natural, Halstead interjected. Wolfe ignored him. Someone introduced into the custody of his attorney a document purporting to be his posthumous assertion of murder. That is your suspicion. Ms. Reinot nodded. Yes. And you wish me, Wolfe said, to determine whether it is genuine, and if not, who contrived it, and to what end? She nodded again. Yes, and to do it quietly. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Quietly. He tasted the word the way he tastes food that might be underseasoned. And you are willing, Wolfe said, to pay for quiet. I am, Ms. Reinot said. Wolfe opened the envelope with the letter opener in one precise motion. He drew out a single sheet of paper, unfolded it, and held it at a distance that would have made a normal man squint. Wolfe does not squint. He glares at print until it submits. He read. He did not make a sound. He did not shift. Only his eyes moved, deliberate, from line to line. I watched him rather than the paper because Wolfe's face is the only reliable instrument in the room. It will not show you everything, but it will show you enough if you know the scale. When he reached the bottom, he placed the sheet on his desk without smoothing it. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Yes?" "Read it aloud." Miss Reinhart's head snapped up. "Mr. Wolfe." "I will not," Wolfe said calmly. "Be dictated to in my office. Mr. Goodwin will read it aloud." Halstead stiffened. "Confidentiality." Wolfe looked at him as if he were lint. "You are in my office. Confidentiality is mine to grant and mine to withdraw. If you disapprove, you may remove yourself." Halstead opened his mouth, closed it, and sat there like a man swallowing nails. I picked up the paper. It was a typed sheet, single-spaced, with a signature at the bottom, Amos Reinhardt, in ink, a signature that could have been forged by a bored clerk or written by the man himself. Hard to tell from where I sat. I began to read. "To whom it may concern, I have been betrayed in the most intimate and calculated way. The illness that took me was not chance or age. It was administered. There are those close to me who have sought to control my money, my decisions, my mind. They have failed, and in failing they have turned to poison. I name no one here because I require proof, and proof is always elusive when the guilty wear the faces of friends. But I leave this statement so that my death will not be used as a blank check for their ambitions. I instruct my trustees to delay the disbursement of the Fulton grant until a competent investigator has determined the truth of the circumstances of my death. If they refuse, I ask that the matter be made public in full, without mercy. Amos Reinhardt." I stopped and looked up. That's it. Miss Reinhardt had gone paler around the mouth. Halstead looked satisfied in a grim way, like a man who enjoys a legal lever. Wolfe stared at the paper as if it were an insect on his tablecloth. Then he said, very softly, "The statement is suspicious." I blinked. "You mean besides the part where it says the old man got poisoned and then tells everyone to hold up a grant unless somebody digs up the truth?" Wolfe's eyes lifted to mine. "Mr. Goodwin, do try not to be an idiot." "I try," I said. "It's a losing battle." Wolfe ignored me and addressed Mrs. Reinhardt. "This document is designed." "Designed?" she echoed. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Not to reveal, but to compel. It is not a confession, it is a mechanism. It provides no facts, only accusations. It contains an instruction that affects money. It threatens publicity. It is written to force the hand of trustees." Halstead leaned forward. "But that doesn't mean it isn't genuine." "No," Wolfe agreed. "It does not. And yet," he tapped the sheet with one finger, "it is uncharacteristic in one crucial respect." Ms. Reinhardt's voice came out small. "Which respect?" Wolfe's lips curved, barely. It was not a smile. It was the expression he gets when a chess problem presents itself. "It is timid." "Timid," I said before I could stop myself. Wolfe looked at me with tolerance, which from Wolfe is practically affection. "A man of severe temperament," he said. "Thus who believes he has been poisoned, does not write, 'I require proof.' He writes the name and lets the world choke on it." Ms. Reinhardt stared at the sheet as if she had never seen it. "That's what I thought," she whispered. "He would have named them. He would have enjoyed it." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Who are them, madam?" Ms. Reinhardt hesitated. Then, as if something in Wolfe's tone told her she had reached the point where the truth was either said or suffered, she said, "There are people around the foundation, around my father, trustees, his physician, his assistant, a man who wanted the Fulton grant." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Ah, the Fulton grant. And what is it?" Ms. Reinhardt took a breath. $20 million for a research initiative in behavioral prediction." I whistled quietly. "That's not a grant. That's a small country." Halstead shot me a look that said I was trivializing tragedy. Yes, I ignored it. $20 million will get you tragedy whether you want it or not. Wolfe leaned back. Now we arrive, he said. A statement that delays $20 million and threatens public exposure is not merely a relic of a dying man. It is a weapon. Ms. Reinhardt's voice was tight. And someone has it. Someone put it where it would be found. Wolfe said, yes. He let a second of silence settle, as if to give the room time to accept the smell. Then Wolfe spoke, and when he did, his tone had that reluctant finality that means he has decided to get involved and is already annoyed by how much it will cost him in comfort. I will take your case, he said. Ms. Reinhardt exhaled, relief and fear mixed. Halstead sat straighter, and I leaned back in my chair because I'd heard the line before in 100 flavors, and every time it meant my day was now spoken for. Wolfe lifted a finger. On conditions. Ms. Reinhardt's eyes widened. Yes? First, Wolfe said, you will provide me with the names and access to those with motive to contrive such a document. Second, you will not involve the police unless I instruct it. Third, you will accept that whatever truth is uncovered may injure your foundation more than any publicity you fear. Ms. Reinhardt swallowed. I understand. Wolfe nodded once. Very well. He looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, you will begin immediately. I sighed. Naturally. Should I start by interviewing the statement? Maybe it'll confess. Wolfe's eyes returned to the paper. Start, he said, by finding where this statement came from. And there it was. The hook in the mouth. Not a corpse, not a scream, but a single page that had wandered into the wrong envelope and disturbed the sanctity of my employer's morning. Wolfe regarded Ms. Reinhardt again. You will remain in the house, he said, until I have asked the necessary questions. Ms. Reinhardt blinked. In the house? Yes, Wolfe said, calm as a judge pronouncing a sentence. You have brought trouble to my door. You will sit with it. I glanced at her. She looked like a woman who had come seeking an answer and discovered she had been seated for an examination. Wolfe settled deeper into his chair. He was not going anywhere. He never does. But in his head, I could practically hear him moving pieces around a board. And the first piece, annoyingly, was me. And I reached for my notebook, because if the statement was a weapon, then somebody had loaded it, aimed it, and pulled the trigger, quietly. Wolfe, of course, intended to catch the hand. Wolfe's order that Miss Reinhardt remain in the house landed with the soft thud of inevitability. Fritz appeared as if summoned by tone alone, his eyebrows lifting a fraction when he took in the tableau, client pinned to a chair by Wolfe's will, counsel stiff as a fence post, and me already reaching for my notebook. Coffee, Wolfe said to Fritz, for 3, and tea for the lady if she prefers. Tea is fine, Ms. Reinhardt said automatically, then checked herself, as if realizing she had just accepted hospitality from a man who had effectively placed her under house arrest. Fritz vanished. Wolfe turned back to her, steepling his fingers. You will understand, he said, that my insistence on your remaining here is not punitive. It is practical. You are the axis upon which this contrivance turns. She nodded. I understand. Good, Wolfe said. Now we will clarify certain matters. He did not glance at the paper again. He had absorbed it. Wolfe never rereads a document until he has exhausted what it suggests without ink. First, he said, your father's illness. Describe it. Ms. Reinhardt straightened. He declined quickly. Fatigue at first. Confusion. Loss of appetite. His doctor said. Wolfe lifted a hand. Do not paraphrase. Tell me what you observed. She hesitated, then nodded. He was angry, she said. More than usual. He accused people, staff, trustees, of withholding information. He complained that his food tasted wrong. He lost weight. In the last week, he barely left his bed. And the cause of death? Wolfe asked. Cardiac failure, Halstead said. Secondary complications. Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. You're an echo, sir. Try not to be. Halstead shut up again. Wolfe looked back to Miss Reinhardt. Your father had enemies. He had disagreements, she said carefully. My father believed conflict clarified character. Indeed, Wolfe said dryly. And the Fulton grant? She nodded. It was his final project. He believed behavioral prediction could prevent social collapse. I scribbled, behavioral prediction equals vague plus expensive equals dangerous. Who stood to benefit directly from the grant? Wolfe asked. Ms. Reinhardt took a breath. Dr. Leonard Voss. He designed the proposal. And the trustees? Wolfe prompted. There are 4, she said. 2 were appointed by my father years ago. 2 were added recently, at Dr. Voss's recommendation. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Recently? Yes. And your father approved this? Wolfe asked. He did, she said, then added quickly, reluctantly. Wolfe nodded once. Reluctance is fertile soil. Fritz returned with the coffee and tea, placing them with quiet precision. Wolfe waited until Fritz had gone before speaking again. The statement instructs the trustees to delay the grant, Wolfe said. Have they complied? Yes, Halstead said, unable to restrain himself. They had no choice. The language, Wolfe said, was designed to leave them no choice. Who among them benefits from delay? Ms. Reinhardt frowned. I don't understand. Delay, Wolfe said patiently, creates leverage. It allows negotiation, revision, replacement. And money held in suspense invites manipulation. Her eyes widened slightly. You think one of them... I think, Wolfe said, that the author of this statement understands governance. He leaned back, considering. Now, the envelope. Describe its custody. Halstead cleared his throat. The envelope was held by Mr. Mercer in his personal safe. According to his associate, the safe showed no sign of forced entry. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Safes rarely confess. Ms. Reinhardt added, Mr. Mercer insisted he never discussed the envelope with anyone. Before his stroke, Wolfe said. Yes. After his stroke, Wolfe said, he is incompetent. Legally, Halstead said. Wolfe ignored him. Mr. Goodwin. Yes, sir. You will visit Mr. Mercer, Wolfe said. You will speak to his associate. You will determine who knew of the envelope's existence, and who might have had access. I nodded. I'll take my cheery personality and a notebook. And, Wolfe added, you will make the acquaintance of Dr. Leonard Voss. I paused. The behavioral prediction wizard. Yes, Wolfe said. Observe him. Do not provoke. He is likely accustomed to admiration. That's a weakness, I said. Wolfe's eyes met mine. Everything is. Ms. Reinhardt watched us with the look of someone who had stepped into a machine that had already started moving. Mr. Wolfe, she said quietly, do you believe my father was poisoned? Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. Belief, he said, is premature. Suspicion, however, is justified. She nodded, absorbing that. Until Mr. Goodwin returns, Wolfe said, you will remain available. You will provide names, schedules, correspondence, anything I request. Halstead bristled. Mr. Wolfe, my client has obligations. Wolfe's gaze settled on him like a weight. Your client has already disrupted my household. I will tolerate no further inconvenience. If you object, you may leave. Halstead looked at Ms. Reinhardt. She shook her head, just once. He subsided, defeated by a woman who had decided that Wolfe was the lesser danger. I stood, pocketing my notebook. I'll start with Mercer, I said. Do, Wolfe replied. And Mr. Goodwin, I paused. Be attentive, Wolfe said. This is not a crime of impulse. It is a crime of patience. I left the office, the calm of the brownstone closing behind me like a held breath. Outside, the city resumed its habit of bumping into you. I hailed a cab and gave the address. As we lurched into traffic, I flipped open my notebook and reviewed what we had. A dead man, a delayed fortune, like a statement that smelled like it had been handled too much. Somebody had wanted that paper found. Somebody had counted on outrage, fear, and trustees who didn't want their names in the paper next to the word poison. Wolfe had stayed in his chair, as promised. But the board was set, and I was the piece that moved. And somewhere between a lawyer's safe and a doctor's ambition, the truth was waiting, quietly. Mr. Lyle Mercer lived on East 72nd in a building that smelled like old carpet and careful manner. The doorman had the kind of face that never forgot a tip or forgave a snub. So I treated him like a man whose good opinion might be useful later and got waved through with minimal inspection. Mercer's associate, a thin fellow named Alan Preece, met me in the apartment's small front room. He had anxious eyes and the look of a man who had inherited responsibilities without the corresponding authority. "Mr. Mercer can't speak much," Preece said, already apologizing for things he hadn't done. "But he recognizes people. Sometimes." "I'll try not to startle him," I said. "I'm gentle." Preece gave me a doubtful look and led me back to a bedroom that had been converted into a kind of quiet bunker. Mercer lay propped up in bed, his face slack on one side, eyes open and wandering. He looked like a man who had been halfway erased. "Mr. Mercer," I said softly. "I'm Archie Goodwin." His eyes slid toward me, paused, slid away. I didn't push. I asked Preece the questions instead. "The envelope," I said. "When did you first see it?" Preece clasped his hands. "Last week. I was reviewing files Mr. Mercer had kept personally, and it was labeled only with Amos Reinot's name." "Typed label?" I asked. "Yes." "And the safe?" I said. "No sign of tampering," Preece insisted. Mr. Mercer was meticulous. "Meticulous men make enemies," I said. "Who knew the envelope existed?" Preece hesitated. "To my knowledge, only Mr. Mercer." "To your knowledge," I echoed. "Well," he admitted, "Dr. Voss was a frequent visitor. He advised Mr. Reinot on charitable structures." I nodded. "Anyone else?" "Miss Reinot herself occasionally," Preece said, "but never alone." I filed that away. Access is rarely solitary. I thanked Preece and leaned closer to Mercer. "Mr. Mercer," I said, "do you know who gave you the envelope?" His eyes flickered. His mouth worked. "Doctor," he whispered. Or maybe he whispered, "daughter." It came out like a man breathing through wet paper. Preece stiffened. "He says things." "Of course he does," I said gently. "Thanks for your time." Outside, the city looked brighter, which usually means something ugly has just happened quietly. I took a cab downtown to Dr. Leonard Voss's office, a glass and steel affair that wanted you to feel smarter just by breathing inside it. The receptionist smiled with teeth that had never known a filing cabinet. Dr. Voss greeted me himself, tall, silver at the temples, eyes sharp and amused. He had the relaxed confidence of a man who believed his ideas were inevitable. "Archie Goodwin," he said, shaking my hand. "Nero Wolfe's assistant. I wondered when you'd come." That told me he'd been expecting trouble, or preparing for it. We sat. He poured water, offered coffee, settled in like a lecturer. "You knew Amos Reinot well," I said. "Intimately," Voss said. "But he was a difficult man, brilliant but suspicious." "Suspicious enough to think he was being poisoned?" I asked. Voss smiled thinly. "Amos suspected everyone, including his own heart." I leaned back. "Did he ever mention leaving a statement?" Voss's eyes flicked just once toward his desk. "No." "Funny," I said, "because a statement surfaced. Typed, signed, instructions attached." Voss folded his hands. "Yes, I've heard." "Heard how?" I asked. From the trustees, he said smoothly. They're unsettled. Are you? I asked. I'm inconvenienced, he replied. $20 million doesn't like to sit still. Did you know the statement existed before Mr. Reinhardt's death? I asked. No, Voss said promptly. And after? I asked. He paused. No. The pause was the interesting part. You visited Mr. Mercer, I said. Not often. Yes, Voss said. We discussed legal frameworks. Did you ever handle the envelope? I asked. No, he said again. Too quick this time. I smiled. You know, Dr. Voss, behavioral prediction depends on patterns, pauses, emphasis. His smile tightened. Are you accusing me of something? Not yet, I said. I'm collecting impressions. He leaned forward. Mr. Goodwin, this statement, authentic or not, has done damage. If it's false, it's cruel. If it's true, it's tragic. Either way, Amos is dead. Dead men still spend money, I said. Or stop it. I stood. Thank you for your time. Outside, I called the brownstone. Wolfe listened without interruption as I reported Mercer. The whisper, Voss's pauses. The whisper is inconclusive, Wolfe said. But the pause is not. You think Voss planted it? I asked. I think, Wolfe said, that Dr. Voss had motive, access, and patience. But I do not yet think he acted alone. Who else? I asked. The trustees, Wolfe said, and perhaps your client. I frowned. Ms. Reinhardt? Control, Wolfe said, is intoxicating. I hung up and headed back, my head full of possibilities that didn't like each other. When I returned, the brownstone felt different, not violated, but alert. Ms. Reinhardt sat in the office, pale but composed. Wolfe listened as I finished. When I mentioned Mercer's whisper, her face tightened. My father trusted Dr. Voss, she said, but he trusted me more. Wolfe watched her. Trust, he said, is often misplaced by those who believe themselves immune. She met his gaze. Are you suggesting? I am suggesting nothing, Wolfe said. I'm observing. Silence settled. Outside, the city moved on, and unaware that $20 million and a dead man's words were being weighed in a quiet brown stone. Wolfe finally spoke. Mr. Goodwin, tomorrow you will speak with the trustees, individually. I nodded. And tonight, Wolfe added, we wait. Waiting with Wolfe is never passive. It is a kind of pressure, applied slowly. Somewhere the person who had typed that statement was counting on time to do their work for them. Wolfe intended to stop time. Morning in the brownstone has a particular sound, the quiet authority of routine. Fritz's footsteps, measured and unhurried. The distant hum of traffic muffled by brick and habit. Wolfe's schedule unfolding like a ceremony. No one was allowed to interrupt. Except, of course, for murder, forgery, or the threat of $20 million wandering off in the wrong direction. By 10:30, the Wolfe had eaten, read, and settled into his chair, with the air of a man prepared to be disappointed by humanity. Ms. Reinhardt remained, perched in one of the red leather chairs, composed but fraying at the edges. She had slept little. It showed in the careful way she held herself together. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said without looking at me, you will begin. I nodded and reached for the phone. Trustees, like cats, are best handled one at a time. The first was Malcolm Deaver, an economist with a taste for television appearances and a fondness for hearing himself speak. He arrived promptly, smiling too much, his handshake eager. Extraordinary business, he said, settling in. Just extraordinary. Tell me about the Fulton grant, I said. He launched into it gladly. Vision. Impact. Legacy. When I asked about Amos Reinhardt's final weeks, his tone shifted, still smooth, but cautious. He was paranoid, Deaver said. I told Clara that. He imagined plots. "Did you ever see the statement before last week?" I asked. "Of course not," he said. "If I had, I'd have insisted on, well, clarity." "Meaning?" I asked. "Names," he said. Amos loved names. I glanced at Wolfe. Wolfe was listening. The second trustee, Eleanor Fitch, arrived next. Older, sharper, eyes like they had been disappointed before and learned from it. She didn't waste words. "The statement is nonsense," she said flatly. "Or worse, calculated." "You think it's fake?" I asked. "I think," she said, "that Amos would never have allowed ambiguity to stand where money was concerned." "Who would benefit from ambiguity?" I asked. She smiled thinly. "Anyone who wanted leverage." "And Dr. Voss?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. Oh, he wanted control. Not the money, direction. The third trustee, Julian Marr, was newer. Too new. He arrived nervous, hands damp, eyes darting. "I don't want trouble," he said immediately. "Then you're in the wrong line of work," I said. He admitted he'd been recommended by Voss. Admitted he'd never met Amos privately. Denied any knowledge of the statement. "But you voted to delay the grant," I said. "I had to," he said. "The language left no choice," I finished. He nodded, relieved. The fourth trustee never arrived. Instead, Wolfe's phone rang. He listened, said little, hung up. "That," he said calmly, "was the police." Ms. Reinhardt stiffened. I did not summon them," Wolfe said. "But someone else has." My stomach did a small, unpleasant turn. "About what?" "About a break-in," Wolfe said. "At Mr. Mercer's apartment." The room went quiet. "What kind of break-in?" I asked. "Selective," Wolfe replied. The safe was opened. The envelope is missing. Ms. Reinhardt's hand flew to her mouth. "But it was here." "Yes," Wolfe said, which suggests the intruder was searching for corroboration or elimination. "And they were late," I said. "They wanted the source copy." Wolfe nodded. "Precisely." Ms. Reinhardt stood. "This is getting out of control." "No," Wolfe said mildly. "It is coming into focus." He turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, did any trustee appear surprised by the delay's consequences?" "Deaver enjoyed it," I said. "Fitch resented it. Marr feared it." "And Dr. Voss?" Wolfe asked. "Expected it," I said. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. "Expectation implies foreknowledge." Ms. Reinhardt's voice was tight. "You're saying he wrote it?" "I am saying," Wolfe replied, "that Dr. Voss designed a mechanism, but mechanisms require access." He looked at her then fully. "You, madam, had access." She went very still. "You think I forged my father's words?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that you benefited from delay. It preserved your foundation's stability while placing pressure on the trustees." Her eyes flashed. "I came to you for help." "Yes," Wolfe said, "which is either admirable or strategic." I watched her carefully. Hands steady, breath controlled, too controlled. "Did you ever discuss poisoning with your father?" Wolfe asked. She hesitated. "He complained. I told him he was ill." "Did you type this statement?" Wolfe asked. "No," she said. "I didn't." "Did you dictate it?" Wolfe asked. No." "Did you know it existed before it was opened?" Wolfe asked. She opened her mouth. The doorbell rang. Wolfe frowned. Fritz appeared. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said, "there is a man from the police." Wolfe sighed, a sound like patience being taxed. "Show him in." The detective, plainclothes alert, entered and glanced around. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "we're investigating the Mercer break-in. We were told you might have information." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "You were told correctly." He gestured. "You may wait." The detective blinked, unused to being seated by civilians, but he sat. Wolfe turned back to Ms. Reinhardt. "Your hesitation," he said, "was instructive." She swallowed. I knew my father was afraid. I suggested he put something in writing." Wolfe nodded. "There it is." "But I didn't write it," she insisted. "Doctor," Miss Voss offered to help draft it. He said, "That clarity required a neutral hand," Wolfe said. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "He typed it. I never thought—" Wolfe raised a hand. "Enough." He looked at the detective. "Dr. Leonard Voss authored a fraudulent statement designed to delay a grant and seize control of its direction. He exploited a dying man's fear and a daughter's loyalty. He has now attempted to destroy evidence." The detective straightened. "You can prove this." Wolfe's eyes were cold and certain. "I can." He turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, retrieve Dr. Voss." I smiled thinly, with pleasure. As I reached for my coat, it struck me how little Wolfe had moved, and how completely the room had rearranged itself around his conclusions. The statement had been suspicious. Now it was fatal. I found Dr. Leonard Voss exactly where a man like him would be when he thought the world was still admiring his reflection. At his office, behind glass, holding court for a graduate assistant who looked like she'd memorized his resume. He looked up when I came in, smile already assembled. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. That was quick. "New York runs on impatience," I said. "Mind coming with me?" His smile thinned. "On what grounds?" "Courtesy," I said. "And because Nero Wolfe doesn't like to wait." That name did something. Not much. Voss was practiced. But it slowed him a fraction. "Enough." "I'm busy," he said. "So is the police," I replied. "They're in Wolfe's office, waiting." He studied me, weighing outcomes. Finally, he nodded, the way a man does when he believes cooperation will still let him steer. "Very well," he said. "Let's clear this up." The ride back was quiet. Too quiet. Voss watched the city slide past like it owed him something. I watched him watch it. At the brownstone, Fritz let us in with his neutral face. The air inside felt heavier, like the house itself was paying attention. In the office, Wolfe sat as he always did, hands resting, eyes alert. Ms. Reinhardt was still there, pale but upright. The detective leaned against the wall, notebook ready. Voss took it all in and smiled faintly. "Mr. Wolfe." "Dr. Voss," Wolfe replied. "You're punctual." "I prefer efficiency," Voss said, taking a chair without being invited. "I assume this concerns the regrettable confusion surrounding Mr. Reinhardt's final wishes." "Confusion," Wolfe echoed. "An interesting choice of word." Voss spread his hands. The man was ill, distrustful. She's vulnerable. "Yes," Wolfe said, "which is why you exploited him." The smile faded. That's an accusation." "It is a conclusion," Wolfe said calmly. Voss leaned forward. "You have no proof." "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "You typed the statement." Ms. Reinhardt flinched. Voss turned to her, eyes sharp. "Clara." "Do not," Wolfe said softly. Voss laughed once, without humor. I assisted, at her request. "Indeed," Wolfe said. "You drafted a document designed to delay the Fulton grant without naming an accused party, thereby creating leverage while avoiding liability. You employed language that threatened publicity to coerce compliance." "That's interpretation," Voss snapped. "No," Wolfe said. "That is design." The detective shifted, interested. "And then," Wolfe continued, "you visited Mr. Mercer. But you ensured the envelope was placed where it would be found only after Mr. Reinhardt's death and after Mr. Mercer's incapacitation." Voss stood. "This is absurd." "You returned to Mr. Mercer's apartment last night," Wolfe said, "to retrieve any remaining drafts or correspondence." The room froze. Voss stared at Wolfe. You can't know that. You forced the safe, Wolfe said. Carefully. Selectively. You were not looking for valuables. You were looking for paper. The detective straightened fully now. Dr. Voss. Voss raised a hand. Wait. He turned back to Wolfe. Even if I did assist in drafting a statement, under false pretenses, Wolfe said. It doesn't make it fraudulent, Voss insisted. Amos believed he was poisoned. Belief, Wolfe said, is not evidence, and you knew that, which is why you included the phrase, I require proof. Voss hesitated. Wolfe pressed. That phrase is not Amos Reinhardt, it is you. It provides an escape hatch. It allows endless delay. Silence stretched. Ms. Reinhardt found her voice. You told me it was for his protection. Voss turned to her, anger flashing. I protected his vision. You protected your control, Wolfe said. Voss's jaw tightened. The Foundation would have squandered the grant. Perhaps, Wolfe said. But that was not your decision. The detective cleared his throat. Dr. Voss, we'll need you to come with us. Voss laughed bitterly. For what? Drafting a document? For breaking and entering, the detective said. And obstruction? Voss looked around the room, calculating. Then his gaze fixed on Wolfe. You haven't proven poisoning, he said. You haven't proven murder. Wolfe nodded. No. Then Amos died naturally, Voss said, and my document merely reflected his fears. Wolfe said, and here we arrive. He leaned forward slightly. Mr. Reinhardt was not poisoned. Miss Reinhardt gasped. What? Wolfe's voice was firm. His symptoms were consistent with cardiac failure, exacerbated by stress and medication interactions. His physician's records, reviewed this morning, confirm no toxins. The detective blinked. Then why? Because the allegation of poisoning was not the crime, Wolfe said. It was the instrument. He looked at Voss. You did not kill Amos Reinhardt. You used his death. Voss sagged, the fight draining out. He would have ruined everything. He ruined nothing, Wolfe said. You did. The detective stepped forward. Dr. Voss? Voss nodded, resigned now. Very well. As he was led out, Miss Reinhardt sank back into her chair, shaking. I trusted him, she whispered. Yes, Wolfe said gently. And that was your only error. She looked up. What happens now? Wolfe folded his hands. The trustees will resume deliberations. The statement will be withdrawn as fraudulent. The Foundation will endure. And my father? She asked. Wolfe's voice softened just a shade. He died as he lived, angry, brilliant, and certain the world was against him. She nodded, tears slipping free. The detective paused at the door. Mr. Wolfe, he said. Thank you. Wolfe inclined his head. Justice is occasionally cooperative. When the door closed, the house seemed to exhale. I leaned back. You stayed in your chair. Wolfe looked at me. Naturally. And you never believed the poisoning, I said. So I believed, Wolfe replied, that someone wanted others to believe it. He closed his eyes briefly. Fritz will serve lunch. I grinned. Human folly pairs well with roast beef. Wolfe opened one eye. Only if properly seasoned. The brownstone settled back into its quiet, the disturbance contained, the statement rendered harmless at last. And $20 million, having been briefly held hostage by ambition, was free to move again, this time without poison in the ink. Dinner was served at 6:15 sharp, which in Wolfe's universe is not a time so much as a moral position. Fritz had restored the dining room to its proper serenity, the table laid with the quiet confidence of a man who knows that order, once disrupted, must be reaffirmed with roast beef and gravity. Ms. Reinhardt had departed an hour earlier, lying steadier on her feet than when she arrived, though not lighter. She had thanked Wolfe with a sincerity that made him uncomfortable in the way genuine emotion always does. He had accepted it with a nod, as if gratitude were a fee already included. I washed my hands, took my seat, and waited for Wolfe to pronounce the world fit for consumption again. He ate in silence for several minutes, carving with precision, chewing with deliberation. Wolfe does not like to talk while eating because he believes food deserves full attention, an opinion I don't argue with when it's paid for. Finally, he set down his fork. "The matter is concluded," he said. "Wrapped, tied, and labeled," I agreed. "Though I'm still impressed you never left the house." Wolfe glanced at me. "Impressed by immobility is a failure of imagination." "From where I sit," I said, "Sam, it looked like you solved a forgery, exposed a power grab, spared a foundation, and redirected $20 million without so much as loosening a cushion." Wolfe dabbed his mouth. Dr. Voss's error was aesthetic. I raised an eyebrow. "That's a new one." "He believed intelligence alone conferred authority," Wolfe said. "It does not. Only legitimacy does." "Tell that to half the city," I muttered. Wolfe continued, warming slightly, not with enthusiasm, but with clarity. Voss assumed that ambiguity would protect him. Instead, it revealed him. Amos Reinhardt was many things, but ambiguous was not one of them. "And Ms. Reinhardt?" I asked. Wolfe considered. "She is competent, cautious, and unprepared for betrayal. She will recover." "That's generous," I said. "No," Wolfe replied. "It is accurate." Fritz appeared with dessert, and setting it down as if punctuation were involved. Wolfe resumed eating. After a moment, I said, "You never told the police the whole story." Wolfe's lips twitched. "The police do not require philosophy." "But you could have," I pressed. "You could have let them chase the poisoning angle." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and waste time pursuing a crime that did not exist. Justice is not served by theatrical efficiency." I leaned back. "You're saying the truth mattered more than the charge?" "I'm saying," Wolfe corrected, "that truth is the only stable foundation for justice. Everything else is scaffolding." I let that sit. Outside, a car horn complained. Inside, the brownstone absorbed it without comment. "You know," I said, "Voss almost had it. The statement was good, clean, plausible." "Plausible," Wolfe said, "is not sufficient, and it must also be personal." I grinned. "You caught him on style." "I caught him on restraint," Wolfe replied. "Evil is rarely modest." Dinner concluded. Fritz cleared the table. Wolfe returned to his chair in the office, the day having finally aligned itself with his preferences. I lingered, notebook closed now, case finished. "Wolfe," I said, "do you ever get tired of people?" He looked at me over steepled fingers. "Constantly." "And yet," I said, "you keep taking cases." Wolfe considered this, then spoke with the air of a man issuing a footnote to existence. "Intellect requires friction. Without it, one stagnates." "People are friction," I said. "Precisely," Wolfe replied. I stood, stretching. "Well, I'll leave you to your orchids and your thoughts." Wolfe waved a hand. "Good night, Mr. Goodwin." As I headed for the door, it occurred to me that the brownstone had been disturbed. Not by violence, not by blood, but by words. Typed ones, carefully chosen ones, and in the end, words were what Wolfe had used to restore order. Outside, the city went on pretending it didn't need him. Inside, Nero Wolfe sat immobile, satisfied, having once again demonstrated that the most dangerous movements are the ones made entirely in the mind. And somewhere, a statement that had tried to speak louder than the truth lay silent at last.